Charleston, South Carolina. The cicadas hummed outside, a sound that usually soothed me after a long day, but tonight it grated on my nerves. I stood in my kitchen barefoot on the cool tile, one hand gripping my phone, the other holding the guest list for my sister's wedding. My planner was open on the counter beside a bouquet of ivory roses I'd ordered for her rehearsal dinner. The candles were set, the music playlist finalized, and the champagne chilling. Tomorrow was supposed to be her big day, our big day. I had handled every detail. "Mom," I said, my voice bright, despite the exhaustion. "Should I bring the rehearsal notes tomorrow? I want to make sure the florist—" There was a pause long enough that my smile faltered. Then Evelyn's voice came through the lines, soft and clipped. "Lauren, the wedding's over, honey." The words dropped like a stone into silence. For a moment I thought I'd misheard her. What had happened last weekend? My chest tightened. I stared at the invitation on the counter, the elegant gold lettering mocking me with the date I'd circled in red: tomorrow. "That's impossible," I said, my throat burning. "You sent me this date," Evelyn sighed. "There was a mix-up. We didn't want to bother you." I closed my eyes. "You didn't want to bother me." She tried to fill the silence, but I'd already stopped listening. I set the phone down gently, the sound of her voice fading behind the dial tone. I stared at the invitation until the letters blurred. Then, very quietly, I said, "Good." The word hung in the air, calm and sharp. I set the invitation down beside the roses. They no longer looked like celebration flowers. They looked like apologies that had wilted before they could bloom. I walked to the window, the night pressing against the glass. Somewhere down by Sullivan's Island, my family was probably still celebrating, posting pictures, laughing, pretending I didn't exist. And maybe for the first time in my life, I didn't care. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to call. I was going to remember. The silence of my penthouse apartment was heavy but not empty. It was the kind of silence that follows a storm, where everything broken is suddenly visible. My hands trembled as I poured myself a glass of wine and scrolled through my phone. The photos were everywhere. My sister Amber, radiant in her lace gown. My mother in pastel silk, holding champagne. My father Charles, smiling proudly. A house full of people who had toasted a day I had built for them without me. I laughed, a dry, bitter sound that echoed off the marble. 3 years ago, Amber had stood in this very kitchen crying about her failed design studio. I'd written her a check before she even asked $25,000 because that's what sisters do. 2 years ago, Mom and Dad had called about the house, Charleston, South Carolina. The cicadas hummed outside, a sound that usually soothed me after a long day, but tonight, it grated on my nerves. I stood in my kitchen barefoot, on the cool tile, one hand gripping my phone, the other holding the guest list for my sister's wedding. My planner was open on the counter beside a bouquet of ivory roses I'd ordered for her rehearsal dinner. The candles were set, the music playlist finalized, and the champagne chilling. Tomorrow was supposed to be her big day, our big day. I had handled every detail. "Mom," I said, my voice bright despite the exhaustion. "Should I bring the rehearsal notes tomorrow? I want to make sure the florist—" There was a pause long enough that my smile faltered. Then Evelyn's voice came through the line, soft and clipped. "Lauren, the wedding's over, honey." The words dropped like a stone into silence. For a moment I thought I'd misheard her. What had happened last weekend? My chest tightened. Our roof was leaking, the foundation cracked. $42,000 later, they were back to hosting garden parties and posting about family blessings. And I had believed it meant something. That my sacrifices, my sleepless nights, my money, my time, all of it mattered. But I wasn't family. I was funding. I set the glass down and walked through the apartment, past the framed degrees, the awards from the company where I was marketing director, the signs of a life built through work and willpower. Every corner reminded me that I'd built everything on my own and still wasn't enough for them. My phone buzzed with a new notification. Amber's smiling face filled the screen again, this time a video from the reception. She was dancing surrounded by guests, her laughter ringing through the speakers. I caught a glimpse of my mother behind her champagne in hand, whispering something to a woman beside her. They both laughed. My stomach twisted, but not from pain, something colder, something that settled deep, anchoring itself where trust used to live. I walked to my desk and sat down, opening my laptop. The glow from the screen reflected off the stack of files beside it, documents, property deeds, contracts. The Sullivan's villa deed was among them, my name printed clearly as the owner. I had bought it years ago when my parents were about to lose it to medical debt. They'd begged for help and I'd said yes, like always. I let them live there rent-free because it felt like family. Now that same house had hosted a wedding I wasn't invited to. I leaned back in the chair, the hum of the city faint below my window. Every memory sharpened their excuses. Their dismissive smiles, my mother's constant comparisons, Amber's digs about me being too career-focused. They hadn't just forgotten me. They had erased me. But they had made one mistake. They had built their comfort on my foundation. And foundations have owners. The thought came quietly, almost kindly, like a whisper of truth that had been waiting for me to notice it. My pulse steadied. I opened the folder labeled Mitchell Family Assets. Line after line appeared: loans, payments, joint accounts, investments I had made in their names. My reflection in the screen looked unfamiliar, steady, unflinching, and for the first time detached. Maybe that was the part of me they feared most. I closed the laptop and stood walking back toward the balcony. The air smelled of salt and rain, Charleston's night sky heavy and alive. Below, the city lights shimmered like fragments of a life that wasn't built on apologies. I'd always thought love meant giving without keeping score. But tonight I realized, love without respect is just servitude. I took a deep breath, letting the cold air fill my lungs, clearing out the ache that had lingered since childhood, the one that whispered I had to earn my place in their hearts. Not anymore. Somewhere miles away, Amber was probably still smiling for photos, her new husband's arm around her waist. My mother was likely telling guests how family means forgiveness. They didn't know that forgiveness had left the table. I whispered to the night, "You think I'm gone. I'm not." A part of me almost pitied them because when the storm came, they'd never see it coming. Not from me, the quiet one, the helper, the fixer, the one who used to call every Sunday just to hear her mother's voice. Now I didn't owe them that voice anymore. I walked back inside and dimmed the lights. The invitation still sat on the counter, a perfect lie written in gold. I picked it up, folded it once, then twice, and dropped it into the trash. Tomorrow I'd start my day as usual, coffee at 8, meetings at 10, but everything would be different. Every minute from now on would belong to me. They'd erased me from a day. I'd erased them from the safety net they'd mistaken for love. The night hummed quietly around me as I sat back down at my desk. Outside, thunder rolled far off the coast. It didn't feel like a warning. It felt like permission. I smiled, a slow, steady smile that felt like the first honest thing I'd done in years. They thought I'd beg, I whispered to myself. They have no idea. And as the first drops of rain tapped against the glass, I opened the deed to Sullivan's villa and began to read. That night, as the rain tapped against the glass and the city lights blurred outside my window, memories began to surface. Every favor, every dollar, every moment I'd spent holding that family together when they were falling apart. 3 years earlier, Amber had been 26 and freshly humiliated. Her first interior design client had dropped her halfway through a project, leaving her $10,000 in debt and drowning in shame. She'd shown up at my apartment door on a rainy Tuesday night, mascara streaked, clutching a broken umbrella like it could save her. "I messed everything up," she said, pacing across my living room. "I thought I was good enough to do this on my own. I just need a little help, Lauren, just until the next client." I didn't even ask how much. I wired the money the next morning, $25,000, enough to cover her losses and restart her business. She cried, promised she'd pay me back, swore she'd never forget it. She never mentioned it again. Not even a thank you. Back then I told myself that's what sisters do, help, no questions asked. I believed generosity was its own reward. But the problem with giving people everything they ask for is that they start believing it's what they deserve. A year later, she was posting glossy photos on Instagram, smiling in a showroom I'd paid to renovate. Her captions read things like, "Dreams come true with hard work and family support." She never tagged me. When people commented, "So proud of you," she replied, "Couldn't have done it without my team." I was never part of the team. I was the invisible engine that made it all run. Then came the house. 2 years ago, my parents called me late one night. My mother's voice sounded oddly cheerful for a woman whose roof was leaking. "Honey, the old place needs repairs," she said. "It's nothing major, just the roof, the porch, the foundation." I pulled up the estimate. $38,000. "That's not nothing, Mom. We'll lose it if we don't fix it," she said. "You know how much this house means to us." I hesitated for half a second, then said yes. I always said yes. I paid the contractor, directly ordered new fixtures, even upgraded the plumbing. The following week, my father texted a brief thanks kid. My mother posted a photo on Facebook, grateful for blessings and hard work paying off. The caption might as well have been a slap. There was never a mention of me, not even in the family group chat. I told myself again, that's what love is, doing things quietly, not keeping score. I thought helping them would make us closer. Instead, it made me an outsider in my own family, the too capable one. The one who didn't need invitations, attention, or affection because she already had everything. That Christmas, I drove down to surprise them with gifts, wine, flowers, even a new coffee machine. When I rang the bell, no one answered. After a few minutes, my phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "We're at the Thompsons next door. You didn't say you were coming." I sat in my car for a long time, engine running, the sound of the rain blurring the lights on their porch. I told myself they didn't mean to hurt me. I told myself I was overreacting. I told myself that love wasn't supposed to be reciprocated in equal measure. But that lie started to crack the night of Thanksgiving. I'd worked all week on a campaign deadline, driven 3 hours through traffic to get there in time for dinner. When I arrived, the table was set for 5. There were 6 chairs. Mom smiled tightly. "Oh, Lauren, you made it. We weren't sure." Amber poured wine and said, "I didn't think you'd come. You're always working." Dad nodded but didn't meet my eyes. By dessert, I realized they'd spent the entire evening talking about Amber's boutique and Mom's new social club. I could have been a stranger at their table. When I got home that night, I stood in my apartment's doorway and whispered, "They don't see me." I was right. It was always the same pattern. Amber needed money for new inventory. Mom wanted to host a charity dinner but forgot to budget for catering. Dad's retirement fund needed a last-minute supplement. I gave and gave and gave out of habit, out of guilt, out of the desperate hope that one day they'd finally look at me and see something more than a wallet with a pulse. But every time I helped, it seemed to push me further out of their circle. Once Rachel, my cousin, the only one who ever told the truth, pulled me aside at a family barbecue. "You realize they depend on your guilt," she said, sipping her lemonade. "They don't see your help as kindness, they see it as obligation." I laughed it off. "You're exaggerating." Rachel had looked at me steadily. "You think loyalty earns you love. It doesn't. It just makes you easy to use." I'd brushed her off then. But years later, those words would come back to me like prophecy. Amber's wedding was supposed to be different. I wanted it to be proof that we'd finally found a way to be close again. I spent weeks helping plan it, negotiating with florists, calling caterers, even paying deposits she couldn't afford. She'd send the occasional text, "You're a lifesaver." I clung to those words like they were affection. When she found her dress, she called me crying from the boutique. "I can't believe I found the one. You'll love it." I pictured us laughing together at her, fitting champagne in hand like the sisters we used to pretend to be. I even took a week off work to make sure everything went perfectly. Looking back, maybe that was the moment they realized I'd always be there no matter how many times they pushed me away. Maybe that's when they decided to see how far they could go. Because when I think about it now, I can see the signs were already there. The way Mom kept changing topics whenever I mentioned rehearsal schedules, how Dad avoided confirming the dates. The way Amber smiled too quickly and said, "Don't stress, I've got it under control." They had been planning my exclusion all along, weaving it quietly through every conversation. And I had been too blind to notice, too desperate for belonging to see betrayal forming right in front of me. I can still remember that last phone call before it all happened. Mom had sounded distracted, her tone clipped, almost relieved when I said I'd handle the guest accommodations. "Perfect," she'd said. "You've always been good at logistics." Now, I know what that meant. I was good enough to handle the work, but not welcome for the celebration. As I sat on my couch that night, glass of wine forgotten on the table, I thought about all those years of giving each dollar, each favor, each quiet act of love that no one ever saw. It felt like watching a reel of my own foolishness. I remembered Amber's words from a few months back when I'd helped her secure a small business grant. She'd laughed and said, "You always land on your feet, Lauren. You're like a cat." I smiled at the time, but now it stung. Because what she really meant was, "You'll survive anything, so it's fine if we hurt you." That night, for the first time, I wondered what would happen if I stopped catching them when they fell. I closed my eyes and saw a clear image, me standing on the dock near Sullivan's villa, the wind cold and steady. The ocean below was dark, endless, and honest. Maybe that's why I loved the sea, it never pretended to care. I opened my eyes, grabbed my laptop, and pulled up the financial documents again. All those years of generosity logged neatly in spreadsheets. It looked less like love and more like a ledger. They owed me far more than money. They owed me truth, and I finally understood what Rachel had meant. Love without boundaries isn't love, it's servitude disguised as devotion. Outside, the wind picked up. The waves crashed harder against the rocks, rhythmic, relentless. I looked at the clock past midnight and whispered, "No more." For the first time, the words didn't feel like defeat. They felt like the start of something new. I turned off the lights, let the apartment fall into darkness, and sat in that silence, the kind that didn't ache anymore, the kind that waited. Because deep down I knew something was about to shift. And when it did, nothing about our family would ever be the same again. That thought kept echoing in my mind as I sat alone in the dark, the weight of years pressing on my chest, until just past midnight the phone rang, and everything I tried to bury came rushing back. The clock read 12:35 when the phone rang. I had been staring at the invitation for so long, the letters had started to blur together, gold ink melting into meaningless swirls. The apartment was quiet, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the faint hiss of rain outside. I picked up on the second ring. Lauren, the voice, was soft, hesitant. It was Rachel Foster, my cousin, the one who'd warned me years ago that my family's love came with fine print. "Rachel," I said, my voice sounding strange in the stillness. "It's late." "I know," she said quickly, "but I couldn't sleep. I saw the photos." Her words hit like a whisper of thunder before the storm. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. "You saw them," I said. "It wasn't a question. I did. Everyone did. And Lauren..." Rachel's voice cracked. "They didn't forget to invite you. They planned it that way." For a moment I didn't breathe. The rain outside turned to a steady drumming against the windows, like it was counting the seconds it took for her words to sink in. "What do you mean, planned it?" My throat felt raw, every word scraping. Rachel hesitated. Amber insisted. "She told everyone you'd take the spotlight, that the guests would talk more about your career than her wedding." Your mother agreed. "They sent the wrong date to keep you away quietly." My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles ached. "Say that again," I whispered. "They lied, Lauren. It wasn't a mistake." Something inside me snapped into perfect focus. My heartbeat slowed even as my hands trembled. I got up and walked to the window, staring out at the city lights. glimmering through the rain. They thought I wouldn't find out, I said. I didn't want to tell you, Rachel said, her voice breaking. But you deserve to know the truth. Who else knew your father didn't stop them, she said softly. He just went along with it, said he didn't want to cause tension. The word tension burned like acid. For years I had been the one smoothing over their arguments, paying their bills, fixing their mistakes all so there wouldn't be tension. Rachel? I said, my voice steady but low. I need you to tell me exactly what she said. There was a rustle on the line, and then Rachel's voice came out quieter as if she were reading from memory. Amber told people, Lauren always makes everything about herself. I want a wedding that feels like mine, not like her show. I felt a strange calm settle over me. No tears, no shaking, just a quiet realization that the line between love and contempt had been crossed long ago. I just refused to see it. Thank you, I said finally. Lauren, I'm sorry. I know, I whispered. So am I. The rain intensified outside the sound, now like static. I walked back to the kitchen and set the phone on speaker, leaning against the counter. They think I'm the strong one, I said, that I'll just take it and keep helping because that's what I do. Rachel didn't answer right away. Then softly, what are you going to do? For the first time in my life, I didn't know. Or maybe I did, and it just scared me to say it out loud. I'm not sure yet, I said, but they're about to find out what it's like to stand on their own. Rachel exhaled shakily. You have every right to protect yourself, Lauren. They've used you long enough. I laughed a short, sharp sound. Protect myself. That's a new concept in this family. The line went quiet again, just the sound of our breathing and the rain filling the spaces between words. Then Rachel spoke, her voice steadier. They built their comfort on you. If you pull away, it'll all crumble. I'm counting on it, I said softly. After we hung up, I sat on the couch, letting the words echo in my head. They planned it. I replayed every moment from the last few months, their vague answers, the changed topics, my mother's tight smiles. It was all there in plain sight, and I'd been too loyal to look. I stood up and crossed the room to my desk. The lamp cast a warm glow over the stack of papers that had been sitting there since the house repairs 2 years ago. Deeds, receipts, contracts. I flipped through them with shaking hands until I found the one I was looking for, Sullivan's villa. My villa. I had bought that house for them when they were weeks away from losing it. I had signed the deed myself, thinking it was a gift of love, a symbol that we'd always have a home together. And now that same house had hosted the wedding I was never meant to see. I stared at the paper until my eyes stung. Then I smiled, a quiet, cold smile that surprised even me. They had erased me from their perfect picture, but they'd done it inside a house that legally belonged to me. Poetic. The clock ticked toward 1 in the morning. My phone buzzed again, Rachel's name lighting up the screen. Lauren, she said when I picked up. There's something else. I shouldn't even know this, but Amber's been using the villa for her clients, hosting bridal luncheons there, pretending it's her property. My laughter came before I could stop it. Of course she has. She's turning your house into her brand, Rachel, continued, voice tight. And your parents let her. That ends now, I said. Are you sure you're ready for this? I've been ready for years, I said. I just didn't know it. After we hung up, I turned off the lights, letting the room fall into near darkness. Outside, the rain had softened to a mist, the air thick with salt and electricity. I went back to my desk and opened my laptop. One by one, I pulled up the documents, the villa deed, the family account statements, the boutique loan I'd co-signed for Amber. Every line, every signature was mine. For years, I'd thought my silence was strength. I believed that staying quiet kept the family together. But silence had only taught them how to erase me more easily. The reflection in the laptop screen looked like someone I didn't quite recognize, someone steadier, older, and done pretending that being kind meant being weak. I opened a new email and typed 2 words in the subject line, property review. Then I addressed it to Monica Hale, my lawyer, and began to outline the details of Sullivan's villa, the ownership, the rental income Amber had taken, the unpaid taxes I'd covered. When I finished, I read the draft aloud. The sound of my voice was calm, almost soothing. It didn't sound like vengeance. It sounded like order being restored. I didn't hit send yet. I wanted to sleep on it. But deep down, I already knew there'd be no turning back once I did. I got up, poured myself another glass of wine, and stood by the window. Charleston was still alive at that hour, the docks glowing faintly, ships moving like ghosts under the fog. I could see the distant shimmer of Sullivan's Island across the water. My family's house. My house. For the first time in years, I didn't feel excluded. I felt in control. The phone buzzed once more, a message from Rachel. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you." I typed back. "Thank you." It's time they learn who they were standing on all along. I set the phone aside and looked out at the harbor again. The rain had stopped. The air smelled clean, renewed. "They think they erased me," I murmured. "But they forgot who built the page." Then I turned off the lights, slipped into bed, and stared at the ceiling until sleep came slow, deep, unbroken. By morning, my mind was clear. The ache was gone, replaced by something sharper, steadier. Resolve. Whatever storm was coming, I wasn't afraid of it. I'd been living in one my whole life. This time, I would be the one controlling where the thunder landed. By the time dawn began to break over Charleston, I already knew what I had to do. No more phone calls, no more tears. It was time to look them in the eye and make them say out loud what they'd done. The morning light over Charleston was pale and washed out, the kind that made everything look colder than it was. I drove through the quiet streets with the windows cracked just enough to let in the salt air. The sky was the color of tin, heavy and flat, and my hands tightened on the steering wheel every time I thought of Rachel's words from the night before. They planned it that way. The phrase looped in my head, as steady as the windshield wipers sliding across the glass. The closer I got to Sullivan's Island, the slower I drove. The familiar stretch of road wound along the marsh, the same road I used to take when I came to help fix their plumbing, drop off groceries, or deliver Amber's invoices for her boutique. It used to feel like home. Now it just looked like a set for a play I was finally done starring in. When I turned into the driveway, I saw the house, the Mitchell family's proud white villa, with its perfect porch and blue shutters. Flower petals still littered the grass from the wedding I hadn't been invited to. Champagne flutes sat abandoned on the railing, the remnants of a celebration I'd paid for. I parked, turned off the engine, and sat for a moment listening to the sea in the distance. My heartbeat felt like a slow drum in my ears. I wasn't here to cry or demand explanations. I was here for the truth spoken out loud for once. I rang the doorbell 3 times. Evelyn opened the door. Her eyes widened surprise, quickly turning to guilt. "Lauren," she said softly, "why are you here so early?" "Because I wanted to see it for myself," I replied. She blinked, unsure how to respond. "See what?" "The aftermath," I said. Her face tensed. "Let's not make this into something ugly, dear. Come in." I stepped past her, into the living room. The scent of flowers and wine lingered in the air, mingling with the faint smell of salt. The house was spotless, almost too spotless, like someone had scrubbed away the evidence of the previous night's lies. My father Charles was sitting on the sofa with a mug of coffee, his posture tense. He looked up, startled, when I walked in. "Lauren," he said, cautious, "we didn't expect no I cut in. You didn't expect me at all. That's kind of the theme, isn't it?" Amber was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through her phone. Her hair was still curled from the wedding, her nails freshly done. When she looked up, her eyes narrowed. "Oh, you found out." I turned to her. "You could say that." Mom's voice quivered. "Lauren, please. We didn't want drama. It was Amber's day." I faced her fully. "So you decided the best way to avoid drama was to lie?" "Sweetheart, don't," I said. The word came out like steel. "Don't call me sweetheart and pretend this was a misunderstanding. You printed the invitations. You mailed them. You sent me a different date. That's not a mistake, that's manipulation. The room went still. Amber tossed her phone aside and sat up straighter. Fine, she said. You want honesty? I didn't want you there. You always make things about you, your job, your achievements, your attitude. I wanted a wedding where people looked at me for once. I stared at her, too stunned to speak for a moment. Then I laughed softly, the sound sharp and humorless. You mean a wedding where I paid for the venue, the flowers, the caterer, and then stayed invisible? That kind. Amber's mouth tightened. You didn't have to help. No, I said. I didn't. I never had to. But I did because that's what family does. Or at least that's what I thought family did. Evelyn stepped forward, her tone clipped but trembling. Lauren, you're too independent. You don't realize how intimidating that is. You make the rest of us feel small. My chest burned. That's not my problem, Mom. My independence isn't an insult. It's survival. She flinched, but I didn't stop. I bought this house when you were drowning in debt. I saved Amber's business when she couldn't pay her bills. I made sure Dad's medical insurance stayed active after his accident. And you repay me by pretending I don't exist. Charles set his mug down, his eyes on the floor. It's not that simple, Lauren. It's exactly that simple, I said. You all used me because you could. Because you knew I wouldn't say no. Amber's voice rose. You're overreacting. We just wanted one day without you controlling everything. I turned to her slowly. Controlling everything? You mean fixing everything, paying for everything, carrying everything? Her face reddened. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, I said. You're angry that I remind you of what you owe me. For a moment, the room was utterly silent except for the faint crash of waves outside. My mother's eyes glistened, my father looked older than I remembered, and Amber's chin jutted out in defiance the same way it had when she was little and caught lying. I let out a long breath. You know what the worst part is? I actually thought helping you would make us closer. I thought one day you'd look at me and see someone you respected. Instead, I'm just the person you edit out of family photos. Lauren, that's not true, Dad said weakly. Yes, it is, I said. And I'm done pretending otherwise. I grabbed my bag from the table and turned toward the door. Mom followed, her voice desperate. Wait, we're still family, Lauren. Don't make this worse. I stopped, hand on the doorknob. You already did, Amber scoffed behind me. So what, you're just walking out? Again, I looked back at her, calm. No, this time, I'm walking away. Her laughter was sharp. And what are you going to do? Cut us off? Make us pay you back? I met her gaze steadily. You'll find out soon enough. I stepped outside before she could answer. The air hit me like a wave, sharp, cold, freeing. For a moment I stood on the porch watching the morning light scatter across the sea. I could hear faint voices behind me, muffled and frantic, but I didn't turn back. The driveway was still wet from last night's rain, the tire tracks from my car already half faded. I took one last look at the villa, its white walls gleaming, the windows glinting like polished lies. Inside that house, I had spent years believing my worth depended on their approval. But walking away now, I realized the truth. I had always been the foundation. They were just tenants. As I opened my car door, I could hear my mother's voice through the wind. Lauren, please don't shut us out. I paused, looking up at the sky, the sun breaking through the clouds like a slow, deliberate promise. I'm not shutting you out, I said quietly. I'm just finally letting you go. Then I got in, started the engine, and drove down the long, curved road that led away from Sullivan's Island. By the time I reached the bridge back into Charleston, my hands had stopped shaking. The sea stretched out beneath me, calm and endless, as if it had been waiting for me to cross it. I rolled down the window, letting the wind whip through my hair. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked different, steady, unburdened. They thought I would scream, cry, beg for their love again. But I didn't need it. Not anymore. They had built their happiness on my silence. Now that silence belonged to me. and they would soon understand what it sounded like when I stopped carrying the weight of their comfort. By the time I pulled into the parking garage beneath my apartment, the anger had already cooled into something sharper clarity, the kind that settles in once you finally stop hoping they'll ever change. The apartment was silent when I walked in, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the muffled sound of traffic far below. I closed the door and leaned against it, letting the stillness wrap around me. My hands were still trembling, though not from anger, just the residue of something breaking apart. The confrontation had been cleaner than I expected, almost surgical. No screaming, no begging, just words that had waited years to be spoken finally finding air. I kicked off my heels and walked barefoot across the hardwood floor. The smell of coffee lingered from the morning I'd left, sweet and faint. I poured a glass of water and stared out the window at the gray skyline. The rain from last night had stopped, leaving the streets slick and silver. It should have felt like an ending, but it didn't. It felt like a beginning, the kind where everything you thought was solid turns out to be smoke. I sat down at my desk where the laptop still glowed faintly, a half-written email draft to Monica on the screen. I'd been too angry to send it before. Now the anger had cooled into something steadier. I reread the lines about the villa, the accounts, the joint loans. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't type yet. Instead, I opened another folder labeled Family. Inside were photos, receipts, copies of messages that now read like evidence. The digital archive of years spent trying to prove I belonged. There was Amber at her first boutique opening, holding a champagne flute I'd paid for. My parents in front of the newly repaired porch, smiling proudly for a picture they never sent me. I closed the folder. The silence was thick, almost sacred. For 2 days I didn't leave the apartment. I didn't call anyone. I answered Rachel's messages with one word replies, fine. Okay. Thinking. It was easier to let the quiet do the work. I cleaned. I read. I cooked for one. Every small act felt like reclaiming space I didn't know I'd given away. On the third night, I walked along the harbor just before midnight. The city was asleep except for the rhythm of the waves against the docks and the distant cry of gulls. Couples strolled past me, arms linked, their laughter carrying through the salt air. I wondered if I looked as calm as I felt, if anyone could tell that a storm was winding itself up inside me, not in rage but in precision. They've taken enough, I murmured to the water. The sea didn't answer, but the reflection of the moon trembled like it understood. The next morning, an email popped up from a Charleston real estate listing company. My name in the subject line caught my eye. Subject: property listing inquiry. Sullivan's Villa owner, Amber Mitchell. My pulse slowed. I clicked it open. The message read, Dear Miss Mitchell, thank you for listing your property for rent. Our agent will be in touch to finalize photography. For a moment, I just stared. The world narrowed into the screen. Amber had listed my house, the house I'd purchased, and paid taxes for every year as her own. A laugh escaped my throat, low and hollow. Of course she did. I picked up my phone and called Rachel. She answered on the second ring. Lauren, she's renting it out, I said. What, the villa? She's using it for her boutique clients, pretending it's hers. There was a sharp inhale on the other end. Oh my God. Yeah, I said. It's time. I hung up before she could reply. For a long moment I sat still. Then I opened my laptop again and began typing. The message to Monica was short this time. Please prepare full documentation on Sullivan's Villa ownership. We need to review all related accounts and property usage immediately. When I hit send, it felt like pulling a lever that couldn't be reversed. The rest of the day unfolded quietly. I made coffee, read emails, answered work calls. Outwardly, everything was normal. But underneath, every breath was different. Every thought carried a new weight. That evening, I stood by the window watching the city fade into dusk. The lights along the pier flickered to life one by one. In the distance, I could see the faint outline of the island across the water. The house looked small from here, almost delicate. Funny how something could look peaceful while holding so many ghosts. My phone buzzed. A message from Rachel. "You okay?" I typed back. "Better than okay." Then I added, "Silence is louder than shouting." I set the phone down and went to the closet. On the top shelf was a box I hadn't opened in years, a collection of old letters, cards, and photos. I carried it to the table and began to sort through them. Birthday cards signed "Love Mom and Dad" with generic notes. Amber's old thank you note from college that said, "Couldn't have done it without you," followed by a smiling face drawn in ink. I picked up the card, looked at the cheerful handwriting, and realized something I didn't recognize: the person who used to need this kind of validation. That version of me was gone. I placed the box aside and opened a new one. This one filled with paperwork, bank statements, receipts, transfers, every financial tie that bound me to them. The list was long, too long. At the bottom was a line I hadn't noticed before: Joint Family Fund Account Automatic Transfer, $4,000 month. $4,000 every month. For over 3 years. I laughed quietly. I had been financing my own erasure. The next morning I called the bank. "This is Lauren Mitchell. I'd like to review all joint accounts with the Mitchell Family Fund." The representative clicked through her system. "Yes, Miss Mitchell. Would you like to change access or permissions?" "Yes," I said, my voice calm. "Close them all." There was a pause. "All of them. Every single one." By the time I hung up, my hands were steady. The first cut had been made, and it felt clean. That evening I poured myself a glass of red wine and stood on the balcony. The air was heavy with humidity and the faint scent of jasmine. The city below shimmered with quiet life cars gliding through puddles, laughter rising from restaurants, music from a saxophone drifting through the air. For years I'd been chasing peace in other people's chaos. Now peace was the silence that followed a closed door. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "You're awfully quiet. Planning something?" I smiled. "Always." Then I added, "They wanted peace. I'll give it to them, just not the kind they imagined." I placed the phone face down, took a long sip of wine, and whispered into the night. They built their comfort on me. Let's see how they live without it. The breeze lifted my hair, and I closed my eyes. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost. I was thinking about what I was finally reclaiming. Tomorrow I would meet with Monica. Tomorrow the storm would begin. But tonight I allowed myself one last moment of quiet before everything changed. Outside, Charleston glimmered like a city, holding its breath, waiting for the wind to shift. And somewhere across the water in the house I had bought the petals from the wedding bouquet were probably still scattered across the floor. Soon enough those too would be swept away. By the time the first light of Monday slipped through my blinds, the decision was already made. No more hesitation, no more waiting. It was time to turn resolve into action. Monday morning arrived with a sharp brightness that didn't match my mood. The city was already alive, the streets humming with early traffic as I drove downtown toward Monica Hale's office. The decision was made. There would be no more delays, no more second-guessing. I'd spent years being patient, accommodating, forgiving, and all it had earned me was invisibility. It was time to stop waiting for justice to appear and start creating it myself. Monica's office sat on the 12th floor of a sandstone building overlooking the harbor. Inside, everything smelled faintly of cedar and ink. Her assistant greeted me with a professional smile and gestured toward the glass doors. "She's expecting you." When I stepped inside, Monica looked up from her desk. She was 41, sleek, confident, the kind of woman who didn't need to raise her voice to command a room. "Lauren," she said, motioning to the chair across from her. "You said this was urgent." "It is." I set the folder on her desk, a thick stack of documents, contracts, bank records, deeds. "I want to take back everything that's mine." Her dark brows lifted slightly, but she didn't ask why. Instead, she flipped open the top file and scanned the first page. "Sullivan's Villa," she murmured. "You're the legal owner." "Yes, your family lives there for now." She nodded, turning to another document, Joint accounts, business loans, property taxes. They've been using your name for years, she said finally, her tone neutral but edged with disbelief. Do you realize how much leverage you have here? I didn't, I said quietly. But I do now. Monica leaned back, tapping her pen against the desk. All right. We'll start by filing a notice of ownership reaffirmation with the county. That freezes any potential transactions tied to the villa. We'll also close joint financial accounts and begin reclaiming your co-signed loans. Every one of them, I said. Her gaze flicked up to mine. This won't be subtle. I don't want subtle, I said. I want final. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Good. I'll draft everything by the end of the day. You'll need to sign a few authorizations. While she gathered papers, I looked out the window. The harbor glistened in the morning sunboats, drifting like slow-moving thoughts. A gull swooped past, landing on the railing outside before taking off again. I envied its ease, the freedom to move without looking back. Monica's voice brought me back. Lauren, she said, her tone measured. I need to ask, are you prepared for the fallout? They'll fight you. People always fight when the money stops flowing. I met her eyes. I'm counting on it. She didn't smile, but something like approval flickered in her gaze. Then let's begin. The next hour passed in a blur of signatures, stamps, and quiet authority. Monica worked like a machine, efficient, detached, unstoppable. When she spoke, it was all legal terminology: ownership reassertion, financial severance, tenancy status. But beneath the language of law, I could feel something more visceral, taking shape, the shifting of power back into my hands. When she finally closed the folder, she said, "You've done the hard part already. You stopped waiting for them to do the right thing." I nodded slowly. I think I stopped believing they could. As I stood to leave, Monica walked me to the door. You'll hear from me tomorrow morning once the filings go through. After that, we can discuss next steps, formal notices, possible eviction if needed. I understand, Lauren, she said softly. This is going to change things permanently. I paused at the threshold. Good. Permanent sounds nice for a change. Outside, the sunlight was sharp enough to make me squint. The air smelled faintly of salt and jasmine. I felt strangely calm, like I'd already stepped out of one life and into another. By the time I reached my office building, my phone buzzed. It was Rachel. How did it go? She asked. I signed everything, I said. The paperwork's in motion. There was a brief silence, then Lauren, I'm proud of you. The words caught me off guard. For years I'd heard versions of affection that came with strings praise that was just a prelude to another favor. Rachel's voice didn't sound like that. It sounded like truth. Thanks, I said quietly. It's long overdue. That afternoon, as I sat at my desk overlooking the harbor, I thought about what Monica had said, that my family would fight back. I wondered what that would look like. Anger, begging, manipulation disguised as remorse. Probably all of it. I didn't care. The email from Monica came sooner than expected. All documents filed. Property notice submitted to Charleston County. Accounts under review. 3 short sentences, but they landed like thunder. It was done. An hour later, my phone buzzed again, an unfamiliar number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Lauren Amber's voice, shaky, breathless. I didn't say anything. I just got a notice from the county, she said. About the villa. What the hell did you do? I exhaled slowly. I reminded everyone who owns it. Her voice sharpened. You can't just take our home. It's not your home, I said evenly. It's mine. It always was. Mom's furious. Dad's upset. This isn't you, Lauren. You don't do things like this. You're right, I said. I used to let people walk all over me. That was the old version. She went silent for a beat, then said, You're being cruel. No, I said softly. I'm being fair. Before she could answer, I hung up. The phone buzzed again almost immediately, but I didn't pick up. Instead, I stared out the window at the water, watching the ripples move across the surface, small, inevitable, unstoppable. For years I had been their safety net. Every mistake, every debt, Every reckless decision. They always landed softly, because I was there to catch them. Now, for the first time, the ground beneath them was real. When Monica called later that evening, her tone was brisk but pleased. Everything's official. You've reclaimed full legal control of the villa and severed the financial accounts. You're free of their liabilities. Free, I repeated, testing the word on my tongue. It tasted strange but right. Monica hesitated. They'll contact you again. When they do, don't respond directly. Send them to me. Understood. Before hanging up, she added quietly, You did the right thing, Lauren. I watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of orange and violet. The city lights blinked on one by one, glowing like tiny promises in the distance. Somewhere across the water, my family was probably sitting together, panicking, trying to figure out how to spin this story. Maybe they'd blame me for being cold, selfish, ungrateful. But I wasn't the villain in their tragedy, I was just the author writing a different ending. As I poured myself a drink, I caught my reflection in the window. My eyes looked steadier, older, but there was something new in them too. Something almost peaceful. They'd spent years calling me heartless for refusing to bend anymore. Maybe they were right. But if having a heart meant letting people break it for sport, then I'd rather live without one. I raised the glass slightly, a silent toast to the storm already gathering. They thought they'd taken everything from me. They were about to learn how much power I'd been giving them just by staying silent. And now that silence belonged to me. By the next morning, the filings Monica had submitted were already in motion, and I knew exactly what needed to come next, cutting every last thread that still tied me to them. The next morning, the city was still waking up when I walked into the marble lobby of the Charleston Bank and Trust. The air inside was cool and faintly scented with leather and paper, smelled like old money, steady money, the kind of money my family had pretended to have for years. I didn't feel nervous. If anything, I felt lighter than I had in months. Ethan Ross, my financial advisor, met me near the elevators. He was polite, as always, early 40s, sharp-suited man who measured his words the same way he measured interest rates precisely. Miss Mitchell, he said, shaking my hand. I got your message. You want to close the accounts? Yes, I said. All of them. He hesitated. That includes the family fund and the boutique line of credit you co-signed with your sister. Exactly those, I replied. Transfer my portion to my private portfolio. Everything else freeze, then terminate. Ethan's brows lifted slightly, but he didn't argue. Understood. He gestured toward his office. Let's go over the paperwork. As I followed him through the glass doors, my heels clicked against the tile, each sound steady final. I sat down at his desk while he pulled up the accounts. Lines of numbers appeared on the monitor, glowing pale blue. I've handled the Mitchell portfolio for nearly 5 years, he said. I'll admit, I didn't see this coming. Neither did they, I said. He gave a small smile, typing rapidly. Once I close these, there's no reopening them under joint authorization. Are you sure completely? He clicked a few more times, printed a stack of forms, and slid them toward me. Then sign here and here. I signed without hesitation, my name looping cleanly across the pages. It was almost soothing, like reclaiming territory that had been taken quietly piece by piece. When it was done, Ethan gathered the papers into a neat pile. That's it. You're officially independent, Miss Mitchell. Your accounts will be fully separated by tomorrow morning. I exhaled slowly. Thank you. He nodded, his tone softer now. You're doing the right thing. Sometimes independence costs peace in the short term, but it buys you freedom for life. I smiled faintly. Freedom sounds like the best investment I've made. By the time I walked out into the morning light, the air had warmed sunlight glinting off the glass buildings around me. For a moment, I just stood on the steps, watching people hurry past, all of them, caught up in their own stories. I wondered how many of them had ever had to buy their way out of love. When I got home, my phone was already buzzing. Amber's name flashed across the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. Lauren, what did you do? Her voice was frantic. The bank says our account's frozen, my business credit line's been revoked. I took a slow sip of coffee. Then maybe you shouldn't have built your business on borrowed money. This isn't funny, Mom and Dad are furious. You're ruining everything. I'm fixing what I should have never allowed, I said calmly. Amber's tone changed, wobbling between anger and pleading. You can't just cut us off, we're family. I let the silence hang. Family doesn't drain you dry and call it love. You're being cruel. I laughed softly. No, Amber, I'm being consistent. She inhaled sharply. You'll regret this. I already regret giving you so many chances, I said, and hung up. The phone started buzzing again, then stopped. I set it face down on the counter and went back to my coffee. The first sip tasted better than it had in weeks. That afternoon, Monica called to confirm everything had gone through. It's official, she said. Your family no longer has access to any joint assets. You're free and clear. Good, I said. Now they'll see what freedom looks like. She paused. Lauren, they're going to react. Don't let them bait you into anything emotional. I'm past emotion, I said. I'm working with facts now. When the call ended, I leaned against the counter, staring at the sunlight streaming through the blinds. The kitchen felt warmer somehow, the apartment less empty. I realized the quiet didn't scare me anymore, it comforted me. That peace didn't last long. Around 7 that evening, my phone rang again. This time it was my father. His voice was low, almost resigned. Lauren, it's your father. What's going on? Your mother's beside herself. I'm sure she is. She says you've taken away our accounts, the villa, everything. We can't access anything. That's because it's mine, I said. Legally and financially. I just stopped pretending it wasn't. He sighed heavily. You didn't need to do this. We could have talked it through. I tried talking, I said quietly. You didn't listen. Lauren, Dad, I interrupted. You've always said you hated confrontation. So consider this mercy. I'm not arguing. I'm just done. He went silent for several seconds before muttering, You've changed. Maybe, I said. Or maybe I just stopped apologizing for existing. When the call ended, I didn't feel relief or sadness, just the hollow awareness that the old version of my family was gone for good. Later that night, Rachel came by with a bottle of wine. She didn't ask permission, just let herself in. You look like someone who just declared independence, she said, setting the bottle on the counter. Because I did, I said, half smiling. We poured glasses and stood by the window, watching the lights of the harbor shimmer against the water. Rachel clinked her glass against mine. To peace, to boundaries, I said. We drank, and for a while we didn't talk at all. It was enough to stand there in quiet companionship, no pretense, no hidden obligations. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer. I saw Amber's post online. She's telling everyone you betrayed the family. Let her, I said. The truth doesn't need a campaign. Rachel nodded. She's going to find out what happens when lies run out of fuel. She already has, I said. The next morning, the messages began. Amber, Mom, even Dad. Long paragraphs about forgiveness, misunderstanding how families shouldn't turn on each other. None of them contained an apology, not one acknowledgement of what they'd done. Only fear of losing access to the life they'd built on my silence. I didn't reply. I let the messages sit unread. Silence would say more than I ever could. By afternoon, Monica sent a final confirmation email, all accounts officially closed. Mitchell family notified. Villa occupancy under legal review. It was done. Irrevocable. That evening, I stood on my balcony, the air heavy with humidity, the sky streaked orange and pink. Below, Charleston moved at its own rhythm, boats gliding through the water, a violin playing faintly from a nearby restaurant, laughter spilling from the streets. My phone buzzed one more time, a message from Amber. You win. Are you happy now? I typed slowly. I'm not playing. I'm just done. Then I deleted it. Some answers didn't need to be sent. I watched the last of the sunlight fade, feeling the weight of years finally lift. For so long, I'd been their safety net. But safety nets are meant for accidents, not patterns. I poured another glass of wine and whispered into the dusk. They'll learn how quiet freedom sounds. The city lights flickered across the harbor, and in that soft golden glow I realized that peace doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, and you only hear it when you stop trying to be the hero of other people's chaos. By the end of that week, I thought the storm might finally quiet down, but instead it broke wide open, and the whole city learned my family's secrets before I ever said a word. The headlines hit faster than I expected. By Friday morning, Charleston Mirror ran a front-page story with a glossy photo of Sullivan's villa, the caption beneath it reading "Mitchell family faces legal dispute over ownership." The article didn't name me directly, but it didn't need to. Everyone who mattered already knew. The details were too specific, too clean. Words like inheritance disagreement and family betrayal pulsed through every sentence like open wounds. By noon, my phone was filled with messages, some from coworkers pretending to be curious, others from people I hadn't spoken to in years. They all wanted to know the same thing if it was true. I didn't reply to any of them. I sat at my kitchen table scrolling through the article until I reached the end where the writer had quoted an anonymous source. "It's a tragedy when money tears a family apart." I almost laughed. Money hadn't torn us apart. Lies had. I sipped my coffee cold by now and looked out over the city. Across the water I could see Sullivan's Island shimmering under the pale sun, deceptively calm. I imagined Evelyn pacing the living room, Amber frantically calling lawyers dad, sitting silently in the background trying to pretend it wasn't happening. For once, I didn't feel guilt. I felt relief. That afternoon, Rachel called. Her tone was cautious. "Lauren, you've seen the news." "Yes," I said simply. "They're talking about you. I know, they're saying you blindsided them, that you took advantage." I leaned back in my chair, eyes half closed. That's what people say when the truth makes them uncomfortable. Rachel hesitated. "Do you want me to make a statement?" "No," I said. "Let them talk. Gossip burns itself out faster when you don't feed it." Still, I could feel it starting, the ripple of my family's panic spreading across the city like oil on water. By evening, the boutique Amber had reopened under a new name had quietly shuttered. Someone online posted photos of the closed for renovation sign on the glass door, paired with a caption that read, "Guess money doesn't fix everything." It didn't take long for the community to turn. The next day, I overheard two women whispering at the cafe downstairs, their voices low but clear enough. "Did you hear about the Mitchells?" The daughter sued her own parents. The other woman shook her head. "No, I heard the parents lied and stole her property." They both sipped their coffee, leaving the truth somewhere in between. That was the thing about Charleston. Its charm was as thin as its patience. People loved a scandal, especially when it involved old families pretending to be respectable. By Sunday morning, Rachel called again. "Amber's boutique lease was terminated," she said. "She owes 3 months of rent. The landlord told everyone she'd been late for weeks." I stirred my tea slowly. And she's blaming you." "Of course she is." Rachel's sigh came through the line. "I know it's not easy to hear, but she's unraveling. She's desperate. She should be," I said. Outside, the church bells began to ring their chimes, drifting through the window. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the sting of those sounds. They used to make me think of family dinners, Sunday mornings, and forced smiles. Now they just sounded like freedom. Meanwhile, Evelyn was losing her audience. Her friends, the women she'd hosted charity teas with, the ones she'd bragged to about her successful daughters, stopped answering her calls. Charleston's social circle was small, and news traveled fast. By midweek, invitations stopped arriving at their doorstep. The phone that had once rung with endless gossip now sat silent. Charles called me again that Wednesday. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail anyway. "Lauren, please call your mother. She's having a hard time." "You've made your point." I deleted it. Making a point had never been the goal. Truth had. And now it was visible to everyone who'd once believed their performance. That evening, Rachel dropped by with a box of pastries. She placed them on my counter without asking and said, "They're saying you're selfish. I know. They're saying you turned your back on family. I did, I said quietly, when my family turned theirs on me. Rachel studied me for a long moment. You don't sound angry. I'm not, I said, just finished. We ate in silence for a while, the only sound the soft clinking of forks against porcelain. When she finally spoke again, her tone was gentler. The irony, you know, is that they always called you heartless, but you're the only one who ever kept them alive. I smiled faintly. Not anymore. Later that night, I walked to the balcony with a glass of wine. The city glowed below, small lights scattered across the dark water. Somewhere in that maze of streets, my parents were sitting in a house full of things I'd paid for, realizing how quickly comfort disappears when it's not earned. The next morning, a new article appeared. This one was crueler. Sullivan's Villa scandal, family split over greed. There was a quote from Evelyn herself, her voice trembling through the print. I just wish she remembered we're her parents. I stared at the words until my vision blurred, not from sadness, but disbelief. Even now she was playing the victim. Rachel called minutes later, furious. They used you for years, and now they're painting you as a monster. You can't just let that stand. I turned away from the screen. They're exposing themselves, Rachel. I don't need to help. She was silent for a beat. You're right, she said finally. People are starting to see through it. Half the comments on the article defend you. Good, I said softly. Let the truth do the work. By Thursday, the villa itself had become a symbol. People took pictures from outside the gate, posting captions like "money lies" and "bloodlines." The same neighbors who once envied my family's home now pointed at it like a warning. I imagined my mother pulling the curtains closed, too proud to admit that the house no longer felt safe. I imagined Amber deleting her social media, her confidence collapsing under the weight of her own deceit. I imagined my father sitting on the porch pretending not to hear the whispers that floated in from the street. It was strange how justice never looked like you thought it would. It didn't feel triumphant or loud. It was quiet, like the slow erosion of a facade, brick by brick, until only the truth remained. That evening, as I folded laundry and listened to the hum of the dryer, my phone rang again. Rachel's voice was subdued. They're saying you destroyed them. I smiled slightly. No, Rachel, they destroyed themselves. I just stopped fixing it. She didn't argue. After we hung up, I stood by the window watching the last streaks of sunset fade over the harbor. The water caught the light, golden and still. I thought of the villa, of the family dinners where laughter hid resentment, of the years I'd spent holding everything together. They used to say I was the strong one. They were right, but not for the reasons they thought. Strength wasn't saving people who didn't want saving. Strength was walking away without turning back. My phone buzzed again, another message from Dad. Please, can we talk? We can make this right. I deleted it without opening it. The waves outside crashed softly against the shore. I took a deep breath and whispered, "You can't rebuild a house on sand." And for the first time in my life, I realized I wasn't thinking about them anymore. I was thinking about me. The next chapter of my life had already started, it just didn't need their permission. By the end of that week, just when the whispers had finally begun to fade, a new storm hit, the kind that didn't stay behind closed doors, but spilled onto every screen and headline in the city. The rumors started small, like hairline cracks on glass. At first, it was a few online posts, anonymous comments, claiming I had schemed to take my family's home, whispers about greed, disguised as independence. I ignored them. But by Tuesday afternoon, the stories had multiplied, twisting faster than I could keep up. Someone had given the local TV station an interview, and I didn't need to guess who. I was in the middle of a meeting when Rachel texted "Turn on Channel 9. Now, I excused myself, stepped into the hallway, and opened the live stream on my phone. There they were, Evelyn and Amber, sitting under soft lighting in a cozy studio, pretending to be brokenhearted. My mother wore her favorite pastel jacket, the same one she'd bought for Amber's engagement party. Her voice was calm, measured, the way it always got when she was lying. "We never wanted this to happen," she said to the reporter, her eyes glistening. "Lauren has always been strong-willed, but family should be about forgiveness, not revenge." Amber leaned forward, tears trembling in her eyes. She took everything from us, the house, the accounts. She even shut down my business. I just don't understand how someone could hurt their own family like that. I felt my jaw tighten, my pulse steadying into something cold. The reporter nodded sympathetically. It must be devastating. Amber nodded, whispering, "It is."